You know, in Old School, when Will Ferrell answers that question beautifully, then he's like, I blacked out. That was me just then. I have realized that. So I've gotten a lot. It's really gotten me some jobs, and it's gotten me with Rotten Tomatoes, and the Tom Cruise article was big, and I've done some big data articles, but I kind of miss writing movie reviews because that's how I started. But I also realized that there are people who write much better movie reviews than me, and so I enjoy my data angle because it's differently. But there's occasionally movies I love to write reviews for. So I just wrote a review for VFW. I wrote a review for The Lodge. I wrote a review for Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I guess I write them more, and I'm going to write one for this when I want to get my voice out there for them.
Especially when it's being overlooked.
Because, I love Wonder Woman. I think that's an excellent superhero movie. Or I love Ant-Man the Wasp. But those movies don't need my help. So that's why I kind of like putting something like a review for Bloodshot into the world. So maybe some people read it and be like, oh, hey, maybe I should watch this. Maybe I should rent it when it's available. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good 2 hours on a Friday night. Like it is literally exactly what you want. And we're just so trained to want these giant $200,000 movies, these $150,000 movies. But the world also needs 30 million to 40 million movies. Like they can't all be giant tent poles. Mm-hmm. We need these smaller movies to push forward more interesting concepts and at least give a chance to more interesting concepts.
And every time an original film fails, like maybe a Jupiter Ascending or films like that, it bums me out because I know that's one less thing that might be funded in the future. So yeah. I guess what I like now is there are I like that there's movies out there such as Knives Out or Ford vs. Ferrari that I'm not saying they're superhero movies, but there are movies that aren't superhero movies that are making 100 million, that are being nominated for Oscars. And I wish we would have more $30 to $40 million movies because there's a couple things, and I was talking about this with my students. So I just lectured my students about 1990s and early 2000s cult classics. We watched Donnie Darko. I talked to them about the cult of that. And when these movies are cheaper, I think they're allowed to take more chances. They're allowed to be a little bit more different. When you get to $200 million, and rightly so, there's just more eyes on it. There's what's the next movie? What's this movie? What are we doing that for? Can we do this? Will this affect a release in China? And so I like that these smaller movies, smaller in air quotes, they can be more flexible. They can tell darker tones. They don't have to be as big. They don't have to be as grandiose. They can feature flower fights, for Pete's sake. So I don't know. I want these movies to succeed because I think that's good for cinema.
It is. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I am a big supporter of the Blumhouse model. I mean, they're putting out $10 million movies. Yeah. And sure, you're going to get a couple of them that stink, but overall, they're all pretty interesting.
Yeah. And like A24 too. Like, hey, them, Neon, Blumhouse. I mean, Blumhouse has just succeeded so well because if you make 7 movies, 4 make the theaters, 2 hit big, you paid for all 7, and you paid for the next 8. So it's a glorious business model. And also what I kind of like is another thing I like about this film, where I'm a fan of Dwayne Johnson. I like his movies. There's just times in movies like Rampage or San Andreas where he's like, oh, I need to steal a helicopter. I'll fly it easily. Oh, I need a plane. I'll fly that. Oh, I need to get this helicopter in here. Oh, I need to get this boat. Oh, I need to get this sports car. Here is a prototype airplane. I got it. I can fly that. And you watch these movies and they're just so almost too talented. They're choking out people with no problems. They don't get hurt by beanbag bullets. And in this movie, I laughed when I first watched it because when Vin wakes up, he goes through the whole rigmarole with Guy Pearce and somehow they set him up to go on this mission. And I love that he goes into the parking garage and there's a truck waiting for him. It's like, why does he know this is his truck? Who? And so
I did the same thing.
In my head, I'm like, this is what? And then he gets into an airplane, but the nanobites read the memory. And so anything he gets into, the nanobites will figure out because he can plug into them. So it's a way of making your hero know everything, but then you realize the truck was placed there, of course, and the jet was placed there. But I like that these nanobites is nerdy. I love Vin Diesel movies. Like, God bless him. Like Last Witch Hunter, this is so nerdy. The nanobites help him fly Learjets. It makes me so happy. And it's just, this is a great excuse, not than it just being oh, my character's a badass.
Yeah. I mean, this film benefits from more than one watch. Because the first time you're watching it, you're like, why is it set up like this? And then it takes 30 minutes for you to understand it's purposely weird and that all these things are being set up and all your complaints about it sort of disappear. And then when you watch it a second time, you better understand that it's supposed to be set up like this.
Mm-hmm. Now, my biggest regret, and I want to see what you think about this, but there's a scene in the movie where Guy Pearce punches a metal table, and he kind of caves it in. And I just went, is Guy Pearce going to fist fight Vin Diesel at the end of this movie? Is there going to be... They didn't even let him... I was like, in Iron Man 3, I was like, is Guy Pearce going to fist fight Iron Man? So I wish there would have been more of a fist fight. But I do like his tactic in this movie where when Bloodshot's finally coming towards him, Guy Pearce just pulls out this massive bazooka, not a bazooka, a giant bullet, and just shoots it at him. And I'm like, that's really smart. Like, who cares about fist fights? Blow him up. I love that scene.
That's why he was in charge.
Yeah, I loved it. It just made me happy about that. But, you know, do you think this movie also, it gives a lot of time to other characters? So, KT, you get a lot of time with her. She gets her own fight scene. She beats up a bunch of dudes. Then you get Lamorne Morris, who chews every piece of scenery beautifully. Then you get Eric, the tech guy, who, I mean, there's an entire subplot about how he wants modification on his member because everyone's saying 6 inches isn't big enough. It's not, listen, it's a juvenile plot line, but this is a movie that gives this actor another, like, I don't know, I liked the scope of it. I liked the few characters. I like that, you know, if you think about Vin, he doesn't really have many great moments in this. My favorite moments belong to the setup of the fights or the flower scene or... What I also love what you said. There's a motorcycle chase in this movie that doesn't do any big jumps. It's just a practical motorcycle chase. And the elevator fight scene at the end, you know what I liked about that was I was able to... This is a big thing we talk about with fight scenes, and we talked about this on an Aquaman episode that's coming up. Fight scenes really work with me when I understand the geography of the location. And I feel like I understood the geography of the locations for these fight scenes. They made sense to me narratively.
The Jackie Chan school of fighting.
Yeah. Yeah, exact. Just know where it's at, right?
Yeah. So one thing that you mentioned is that there are a lot of other characters who have cool moments into it. And we talked about this on the Missing podcast. But there were critics who said the relationship between KT and Vin Diesel's character was strange. And what I think they missed about it was that it wasn't a romantic relationship. There was no point at which I thought those two were going to hook up.
You know what's kind of great? The same people who cheered Hobbs and Shaw, and Jason Statham makes out with the same actress, Isa Gonzalez, in Hobbs and Shaw, and he's older than Vin Diesel. And no one complained about that, but they're complaining about in this movie, for the first hour, he thinks his wife is dead, so he's in mourning. There's nothing between these two. Then he meets his wife. She's like, you haven't been here for 5 years. Like, get out of here. You're a creeper. So he goes back. So this scene, I think it's more of like a mutual respect, a wounded warrior. There's no inclination of any of that. And I think sometimes they're framed closely together, but that's for like an easy over-the-shoulder shot. Like to get them in the frame together to shoot it quicker. There's none of that. Like they're both kind of lost souls. She was killed. And this guy Pierce is basically he's very abusive towards her. He's like, I will kill you at any time if you leave. And so she's got her own crap to get over, right? Like, and then he's got his stuff. Like, they're not a relationship of like sexual attraction. I think they're more coworkers that are going to go on missions together.
Yeah, exactly. And it's strange that we're so trained to think that if there's a man and a woman on TV on screen, they're going to end up together. Like we're supposed to think that they end up together. I like that they're more or less partners and not romantically involved. I'm going to say that I don't know if the comic book character has a romantic relationship with anyone. I'm only going off the movie.
I do think that people, one thing I try to avoid is, so I know some very, very, very smart people who go into movies with expectations or preconceived notions, and then if that doesn't live up to it, they don't like the movie. So I think sometimes people watch this movie, they think it's this hacky actioneer. Oh, this girl's just here to be a love interest. I think sometimes very smart people gets caught thinking of old patterns, when I don't think that was the case with this one. And does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like expectations are kind of cloud them a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, the only weird scene for me in this whole film is the underwater dance scene or kata, or I don't know what to call it, exercise scene. Yeah. It felt very much like they were trying to show us what her power was, which is being able to breathe underwater, I think. But the camera sort of lingered on too much on her. It's kind of a strange scene. It is the one part of the movie where I'm just like, what is happening here?
I guess for her, like, the problem is we don't see those moves later. So maybe if she would have gone to the bottom of the pool and practiced punches, does that make sense? Or kicks, or like underwater training, does that make sense? And then she fights somebody later on or has a water mission, then you're like, okay. But yeah, this one felt very, we're going to show you 3 minutes of synchronized swimming.
with an attractive woman. Yeah. That was off. That was the one off-putting scene. Yeah. So I've
definitely seen worse, but that doesn't make this one right.
Second Star Trek?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Oh, man. And then you know what their defense was? They're like, oh, well, we show Benedict Cumberbatch shirtless too. It's like, come on, guys. Come on, guys. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about my first WTF moment in this film.
Oh.
And you know what it is, but
I was trying to play like I didn't.
I know, it's okay. It's okay. I don't think we need to go too hard. But the second line of dialogue in this film is, "Ain't looking good, LT. Soup sandwich in here." It makes no sense at all. What's a soup sandwich?
Let's see. Okay. So you typically, like a grilled cheese and tomato soup, but so you dunk the grilled cheese into the tomato soup. So the tomato soup, if someone threw tomato soup around a room, it looks like blood. And
Mark, I think you are on to something. So my initial concept was a soup sandwich would be a thin, shallow bowl filled with tomato soup with a grilled cheese floater. However, your interpretation is of taking something that is porous, a porous bread, and sticking it into soup, and it soaks up the soup. It literally becomes a soup sandwich.
Yep.
You cracked this mystery.
Nailed it, man. Like, you know when people do chili and they put crackers in the chili?
Oh my God.
And the crackers absorb a lot of the juice, and then it becomes basically just a solid, and it's no longer chili?
I mean, that's what I do.
But, you know, it's funny. I didn't even notice that soup sandwich line. I was just too preoccupied thinking about Vin's helmet. Well, and then Toby Kebbell and his sandals and socks jumped in, and I was like, oh, this is it. I love this movie. I
watch my movies with
a quarter mile at a time.
A quarter mile at a time, 15 minutes at a time, with the closed captioning on, so I can see what they're actually saying and see if there's any difference. Because sometimes I can't quite hear it. You know, sometimes the audio is not great. And that was just the immediate thing I saw, because I was like, how did I miss this the first time I watched this? This is insane.
I do want you to go back and look for the thank you moments. So
okay.
I think you'll like, because it's neat. Like, it's a cool little bit there by Vin Diesel. And I think, how about this? Let's take a quick break. Maybe you go back and watch that. Maybe you don't. But when we come back, we'll talk more Bloodshot. And we have some fun drafts coming up. Welcome back to Movies, Films, and Flicks. And can we talk about the flower fight scene?
I hope so. I'm really excited for it.
This flower fight scene is, I know there's an elevator fight scene. I know there is a chase through the streets, yada, yada, yada. But there is this fight scene with the flower. So what happens is they're in a tunnel. Vin Diesel's character is hunting down Toby Kebbell because he thinks Toby Kebbell killed him and his wife. He blocks everybody in a tunnel, but a flower truck flips and flour goes everywhere and people punch through bags of flour. So what follows is a fight full of very interesting slow motion shots and mercenaries getting obliterated in various ways. But what I like about it is it showcases what his limits and capabilities are and his strengths. So I think it does a few things really well to showcase not only a good fight scene, but to showcase what his powers are.
Yeah. So my thoughts on this are the first one is, I am almost 100% sure that all those people would have been killed in a fire because flour is flammable.
Yeah.
So if you were in an enclosed space with a bunch of flour hanging in the air, there'd be like a mini flash fire, and they would have been broiled.
Wait, you haven't heard about Carol's flour? It's non-flammable.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's in
Okay.
this world. I saw an ad. I'm just making this up, but